Good day, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Pathway to 17 Summit. You are here within the Inclusive Digital Finance stream, and we are in the session Design Principles for Women's Economic Empowerment. My name is Tariro, Nyimo, and I'm a Deputy Divisional Director within Digital Frontiers Institute. That is the school that delivers our program. And my guest today, I have with me Hamilton McNutt, co-founder and COO of Strategic Impact Advisors, who participated in the research that we're going to hear all about today. So welcome, Hamilton. And my other guest is Shoheli Afrin, who is an additional director, Financial Inclusion Department at Bangladesh Bank. She's going to be giving us an on-the-ground opinion as we are focusing on one of the exemplars from Bangladesh. Welcome, Shoheli.
Hello, thank you, Tariro.
Thank you. Okay, so in this session, what we're going to do is we're going to first have a presentation on the research that Strategic Impact Advisors, as well as Grid Impact, worked on for the purpose of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation program officers, really to zoom in on the most critical barriers and opportunities to enhance women's economic empowerment. So this is going to be quite interesting. They focused on the priority countries for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which includes Bangladesh. So we're going to zoom in on a Bangladesh exemplar, but let me not preempt anything. Over to you, Hamilton.
Thanks, Tariro. I hope everybody can hear me all right. So as Tariro mentioned, we've been working for the past year with Grid Impact, and my colleague Alexandra Fiorillo couldn't make it today. She is on maternity leave, which is wonderful. We're sending her all the positive vibes of new motherhood. So we worked with Grid Impact and the Gates Foundation over the last year to really sort of help identify sort of barriers and opportunities to women's economic empowerment through financial inclusion. So today we wanted to share some aspects of the resources that resulted from this work, as well as discuss what we found as sort of emerging themes and design elements across a wide range of interventions that we looked at that sought to increase women's economic empowerment. So just really quickly, the goal of this work, has been to sort of examine a set of barriers inhibiting women's access and usage of financial services, determine which barriers are most resonant to different segments of women in different markets, and make recommendations about the kinds of interventions and programs that might help remove or mitigate or address these barriers so women can have access to and use a range of financial services that will fit their needs. Ultimately, our goal is to remove barriers to women's economic empowerment in the financial inclusion arena. So as part of this work, it's really been to help sort of also ensure that the financial services for the poor team at the Gates Foundation is focusing on the right barriers to achieve their WEFI 2030 vision statement, which is on the right side of this slide. And also their strategic goals and to understand the opportunities, challenges, available tools, and trade-offs as they set priorities to make new investments for the future. So really, we're trying to help the Gates Foundation and implementing partners of the Gates Foundation and the general financial inclusion community understand is sort of looking at and identifying methods to target barriers that are relevant in a particular market and a particular segment of women that you're working with. So just, again, the resources created during this barriers and opportunities analysis, are intended for really two audiences. One, members of the FSP team, the Financial Service for the Poor team at the Gates Foundation, and then implementing partners, as I just mentioned. So the research our team conducted may prove to be helpful as a reference resource for implementing partners so that they can triangulate country-specific findings with the large evidence base that we compiled to provide sort of some reasoning and evidence-backed thought around how to identify barriers in specific contexts. We hope this resource will provide helpful evidence to inform and support program design decisions for everyone on this call and participating in this conference. So, what I really wanted to do today was kind of walk through just a little bit of background of what we're working on, and then walk you through the tool a little bit, and then move on to discussing sort of these design elements. So here are the barriers. There was 8 categories, around 40 different barriers that we identified and looked at. So you have barriers from accessibility to consumer protection, to cost, to human resources, information availability and capability, prerequisites, product and service quality, and social norms. So we looked across all of these different barriers that we've identified, looked at a lot of evidence behind those barriers, and linked these barriers to different segments, different parts of the customer journey as well that women experience through their financial sort of inclusion journey. We also worked with Mathematica and the Gates Foundation to help analyze Findex data to segment respondents from the Findex in 4 different segments in Gates FSP team focus countries. So those countries are Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So these segments, we have 4 different segments that we've used to kind of help bucket women and men in sort of their journey, their customer journey across financial services and uptake and usage of financial services. So the first segment being excluded marginalized, meaning they don't have a financial account at all. They don't have sort of an income stream from employment or government to person payments. They haven't done any basic transactions like over-the-counter transactions. And they don't have access to a phone, and they don't have access to an agent or a point of service close by. So they're the most marginalized, the most excluded segment 1. Segment 2 is excluded high potential. These don't have an account either, but these are women that have conducted a basic transaction over-the-counter transaction or have utilized a financial service, or they have an income stream from employment or GDP, and they also have access. They have a mobile phone. They're not too far away from financial service points of service. So that segment 2 is sort of the high potential. They don't have accounts yet, but they're likely the ones that would move into account ownership, sooner than segment 1. Those in segment 1. Segment 3 is included underserved. So these have an account. These are people that have accounts, but they have not conducted sort of advanced transactions. So it's really basic usage or idle usage of the financial service account that they're using. And then finally, segment 4, included, not underserved, are ones that are conducting more regular advanced transactions. We actually have a session on this segmentation model tomorrow. So if you're interested, tune into that one as well. So I'm really quickly just to take a look at how this resource can be used and what we've done. I'm going to move over to another deck real quick. And all of these resources can be found on a microsite that should be showing up in your chat in terms of a link. So that microsite will have all the different resources, this big resource deck that I'm going to show you right now, and a bunch of other resources that we've developed around this work. So in this larger deck, this is kind of a one-stop shop for all the resources we've built. You can provide sort of a high level, you can find high-level analysis findings, more in-depth and details around sort of the segments, around the barriers themselves, around the exemplars that we've pulled out, which is really the focus of this session. This table of contents is really sort of our control center here. Everything is very clickable within this deck, so it's pretty easy to navigate around. So let's say that I'm doing some work in Bangladesh and I'm interested in better understanding what the barrier analysis says specifically about that market. So to do this, I'm going to click on the click on the FSP focus country analysis and just scroll down to the Bangladesh slides here. So every country has 4 slides that they do analysis with. So this is a breakdown of the segments that I just went over in Bangladesh. So as you can see, segments 1 and 3 are the largest segments of women by population size in Bangladesh. So, that just gives you a breakdown of those, excluded, included segments that I just went over. This takes a better look at a more in-depth look at sort of employment sectors by segment, education levels, age as well, sort of all the different types of data that we can glean from the Findex and these segments within Bangladesh. This looks at specific barriers that we found to be more relevant. It's not that all barriers aren't necessarily relevant, but more relevant to segment 1, because segment 1 is the largest population of women in Bangladesh at the moment based on our analysis. And this is, by the way, Findex data from 2017. We are going to be doing an update with the new Findex data. But again, this sort of just gives you a high-level analysis of what are some of the key barriers that are more relevant to the largest segment in the market. And then finally, we want to do a little bit more of a dive into segment 1. Okay, so are there parts of the Findex that can tell us a little bit more about segment 1, and which barriers might be more relevant and more important versus and less important. So, these kind of point out that, perceived and lack of money, that barrier is large, as over 55% of women in segment 1 cited not having enough money as a primary barrier for lack of access to an account. Women also cited that they don't have a need for formal financial services. And so, one of the barriers that we explored a lot within this is the lack of peers and family network who use DFS. And that's often linked to feeling like you don't have a need for formal financial services. So let's say, okay, this barrier here, the lack of peers, family network, and who use DFS is something you wanted to explore a bit more. So you could go back up to the table of contents, and this annex here has all of the details of the barriers that we looked at. And so like very, very in-depth look at each barrier and the evidence behind that barrier. So what I'll do here is I can click down and just and scroll down to where this barrier is. So lack of peers and family network. So each barrier has several slides citing key evidence, resources behind that evidence that basically can help you build a case for thinking about this barrier and in the context that you're working in. And so what we can do now is sort of we can read through this, but we can also say, okay, what are some interventions? What are some things that people have done in the past to try to address this barrier? So what are some exemplars that have happened in the past to try to address lack of peers or family network using DFS? And we can click on this here. And this takes us to our exemplars page, which is kind of the topic of today. So each exemplar that we pulled, has sort of relevance to the segment, the geography, the sources that it's used. And then we can look at sort of key activities within that exemplar, the outcomes, enabling environments that help that intervention succeed, the key design elements, which is something that we'll be discussing today, potential for scale, replicability, challenges, and recommendations. So again, these are sort of guidance and resources that you can use to make decisions around sort of the barriers that you're focusing on, and then learn from interventions from the past on how to potentially approach those barriers. So I'm going to hop back to the deck that I was initially presenting real quick to talk through some of the design principles that we sort of identified when looking through all of these exemplars that we looked at through this research. So we define design principles as a set of guiding rules and elements to be considered during a program's conception and design. These principles will help create intentional, effective, and valuable interventions and activities that work for women. So interventions that adopted one or more of these principles were also found to be successful in addressing barriers to WIFI, and they had stronger outcomes, more positive outcomes. The 5 principles should be considered when designing programs and activities specifically for women, given their popularity in existing programming and impacts on improving access and usage to financial services. So, these are sort of the key themes around design principles that emerged after looking around 40 plus exemplars. The first one being bundling a product and service with capacity building. So not just throwing a product at end users, but being very intentional about how you're building their capacity and understanding to use that, and also how you're building their sort of baseline digital literacy and digital capacities as well. The second one was targeting both supply and demand side actors. So taking a market systems approach to this, not just focusing on one side or the other, when you're designing a program. The third was leveraging multiple communication channels, and then also building trust and also tapping into trusted community members for program implementation. So trust, as we all know in technology, is a huge barrier. So those interventions that worked with community members to build trust through the local social networks were really successful and had a stronger impact for uptake. Using women-centered design models, so really thinking about women as the key and core customer when designing a intervention was very helpful in sort of expanding out the right financial services for women. And then finally, making interventions affordable, always having cost at the front of your mind, making sure that things were affordable after the program left. Great. So I am going to stop talking now and transition over to Tariro, who's going to set up a conversation with Shoheli and myself. So I'll stop sharing my screen and we can discuss it. Tariro.
All right, so thank you so much, Hamilton. I think there's a lot of information that has been thrown at us. And thank you very much for that research. I mean, identifying 35 key or strategic barriers and over 40 interventions for them. And going through, I think you said 300 resources or those exemplars, which one of them is from Bangladesh that you pointed out on mobile money and the Bcash scenario. So I'm going to now hear from Shoheli, who is in Bangladesh and works for the Bank of Bangladesh here. After listening to all of this, Shoheli, and when thinking of designing interventions, how do you frame these barriers? How do you think of it from your context as someone who's on the ground?
Okay, thank you for the nice question, Tariro and Hamilton. That was a very in-depth presentation that has a lot of information in it. And now we can say firstly that Bkash is the largest mobile financial service provider in Bangladesh, but there are also other providers, and we are working all with them. We have found out that there are many barriers, like as Hamilton said, that there are many barriers, mostly from the in the rural areas and semi-urban, suburban areas. Am I audible to you? Can you listen me properly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes. So the main barriers we have found that there are lack of control over decision making, and there is low digital technology literacy level, that the female are not that much literate, and especially they are not digitally literate, and especially they are most of them, many of them are not literate at all. So it's a huge barrier, and we need to work on it, that this service come handy to them. So I think, and there are also unavailability of devices and necessary technological and necessary infrastructure, like the network that doesn't reach every corner of the country. So the female face a gap here to reach the provider, and they're also we can't say that not only we can say that not only marginalized but also a big part of educated solvent women. They are not using the mobile financial services because many of them don't find it handy, and many of them doesn't need the necessity because they are not used to handle their financial transactions. Then a survey revealed that 32% of MFS non-users refrain from using the service for fear of being victim of fraudulent activities. So we need to uh, design a system that women overcome these fears and these barriers. And we think the designs Hamilton have proposed and suggest that leveraging multiple communication, we should combine all the proposals to uh, make the environment female friendly, female user friendly. So the leveraging multiple communication channels for recruitment and trusted community members for program, what Hamilton suggested. And there are, I think, I feel an urge to recruit more female communicators in the rural area, because the rural females potential customers who have very less transaction in a month, like say 3 to 5 transactions in a month, they don't feel the need to go to the agent in the city or uh, nearby shop. So they need that the communicators or the agent will come to them, and then they are not very comfortable to communicate with the male uh, agents. So there are very low female mobile financial services agents in Bangladesh. So if there are female financial agents in Bangladesh in a more robust way, and the mobile financial services providers employ more female in this sector, so the female potential customers will feel privileged, and they will feel comfortable to express their interests and their needs to those female agents. So I think we need to design many this MFS sector in a way that the barriers are eradicated. Over to you, Tariro.
Well, thank you, Shoheli. I think you pointed out a lot of barriers there, and also cited some supply side barriers, as well as some of the barriers that have been identified in this research already. But coming back to the exemplar that Hamilton shared, an example of a sample that was taken for Bcash users, right? But these were migrants, and these were very low literacy rate, very low income, and then they zoomed in on women, the women participants, right? And it was said that there's an influence on family networks and just that peer support from them and how they uptake the mobile money. Can you give us real life examples of this situation, whether you agree with that really, if I'm a migrant, okay, when I'm saying migrant, it's someone who's moved from the rural area side of Bangladesh and gone to Dhaka, maybe the inner city, the capital city, and then now I'm remitting money back home. But then because maybe I haven't really been sensitized to Bcash or something, but if my friends, my family, my peers are using it and the uptake, can you talk about that as a real life situation, if it helps, if it's something that should be used as a design element?
Okay. As you have said, there are many migrant female workers in the cities of Bangladesh, like Dhaka. There are a huge number of garments workers, and um, uh, uh, then there are many girls who are engaged in household works, or many schools, or many offices as low-paid professionals, low-paid workers. So they need to remit their money back to their home. But the main issue there, that I can cite a real life example, that a girl who works as a cleaner in my office, she can't remit her salary to her family, where her children are in the back in the home, and her mother is taking care of them, and her mother-in-law is taking care of her kids. But she face lot of difficulties to remit her money, because she uh, doesn't have uh, many papers, or national ID card or documentation with her to open an account, and she doesn't have a mobile phone which can serve her purpose to operate a mobile MFS account regularly. Then she has to go to a nearby shop to send her money through the Bikash agent, and then there are so there she is reluctant to pay the commission to the agent, because her income is very limited, and she doesn't want to pay that commission to the shopkeeper. And again, when her family members withdraw that money, they need to go a far way from their home, and this is very troublesome for them, because their communication and transport is very weak in the remote area. So they face difficulties to withdraw it from any agent. So they use their neighbor's account. So they use their neighbor's account, and at the time, uh, as they don't have a mobile and MFS account of their own back at her home. So when they use the neighbor's account and neighbor's mobile phone, they need to depend on the neighbor, and there is lack of privacy. The neighbor got to know the amount she is remitting, and sometimes they demand something for that service, and sometimes they don't want to go. They delay that. I'll not go today. I'll go day after tomorrow, and then you will get your money. So the service is not instant. Uh, Although we are having the infrastructure, but because of not having their own mobile phone, and not having their own MFS account, they do not get the facility instantly. So there are many examples like this in Bangladesh, and uh, uh, as there are lack of literacy in the rural area, the females are less literate. They can't read the SMS or the text they receive about the amount or the remitting number, and there are many examples that people copy a message SMS from the Bikash. They copy a Bikash message and then send it from their own number. But the illiterate people, they can't identify that it hasn't come from the Bikash operator. They think that this message has come from Bikash operator, and then they receive a phone call, and someone claimed that I have sent some money to you by mistake. Please send me back that money. So they can't check because they don't have the app. So they can't check that if their balance has been credited or not. So without checking, they see the fraudulent message, and they send back the money. They try to send back the money in cash from the agent in the shops. They lost their money, and then they realized that there is no credit in their MFS account. So there are many barriers and these situations that people are facing in using MFS.
Well, thank you, Shoheli. I think you really highlighted what Hamilton called segment one, those who are marginalized and underserved, and some of the challenges that they face here. But let's get a question from our audience here. We have Lawrence Ruseri who say, great work, Hamilton. Your expertise from our IFC Vodacom merchant acquisition keeps scaling. Great insights like the topic. Okay, so it's a comment, it's not a question. But Hamilton, just from what Shoheli has said, and we were speaking about peer influence and family and friends, but that was specific in this research. It was really specific to a market that already owned a phone and possibly a little bit literate. Now, from what Shoheli has described here, what do you have any comments towards that and how this affects our design elements?
Yeah, well, it is as you mentioned, Tariro, this particular intervention, in the enabling environment factors, phone ownership was quite high at 99%. And I know that's not necessarily a reality, as Shoheli was mentioning, in every context. So I think these types of things are important to consider always before any intervention, especially when you're using digital tools, to take stock of where access to phones and SIMs are with the population that you're working with, which is sort of a prerequisite barrier that we explore as well in this work. But then also, Shoheli has been touching on this a lot, which is the digital literacy element and basic numeracy and literacy element as well, which are also barriers that we explore. So I think one thing that we discovered, and it's also kind of inherent in sort of the complicated elements of life, is that a lot of these barriers are very connected, and a lot of them either will compound the situation or help alleviate another barrier. So things like digital literacy and sort of these core elements were sort of the most connected barriers, and we do have some analysis on that in the larger deck and in the microsite resource that we link to. So it's not like we can just tackle lack of peer networks using DFS and that's going to solve everything, right? That's linked to a variety of other elements. But when designing for just kind of going back to the design elements, I don't think anybody in any of the interventions that we reviewed was designing for one barrier only, right? It was a myriad of barriers that were linked, that they'd identified as being linked, and we're thinking about how to approach those barriers. So I think it's obviously important to understand the context. That's why we wanted to provide details around enabling environments of these, because some of these interventions happen in very, I guess, very not easy, but easier circumstances in terms of literacy and phone ownership and network access and being closer to agents versus being far away. So just having that context, I think, will also help adjust in the design as you go along and think about the intervention that you're trying to do. So I'll stop there.
All right, Hamilton. I think from our audience, there's someone who really wants to know how the opportunities that exist for addressing the barrier of literacy. I think literacy especially digital literacy, is a key barrier that can be identified in different countries even the ones that are not part of this research. So maybe if you can just take us through or go back to the research or what you found were key design principles when you're looking at digital literacy.
Yeah, so I'll go really quickly, but I'd love to hear Shoheli's experience on this as well. So based on the research and our work, obviously, when you're focusing on digital literacy, for example, it's really important to take into account that, just because you may not have strong numeracy skills, strong basic literacy skills, it doesn't mean that you can't be digitally literate, right? There are elements that obviously it helps, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite. They can also happen sort of in parallel. So keeping that in mind, key sort of design elements around literacy that we've looked at, it's, again, the example was through visuals. Yes, visuals, video, things like that were important. Audio is another one that we've seen used. The use of IVR to access audio lessons, and so there's a couple resources out there that are public. So GSMA has MIST, which is their sort of digital literacy curriculum that is really, really great. And then also our firm, with funding from USAID, developed Hey Sisters, Show Me the Mobile Money, which is an audio-based digital financial literacy program. And so in designing that, our focus was very much on entertainment and audio as sort of a channel. So the curriculum is there for public use. The scripts are there for public use if you need to translate it into new languages for recording. We have recordings already for in over 15 languages on the Hey Sisters site. So focusing in on accessibility, to build literacy is important. And then also, just if you can, it's a little more expensive, but just literacy through doing, right? So just tangible activities on a smartphone or on a phone in terms of navigating menus and things of that has always been powerful as well. So having something tactile that people can use and practice on. So Shoheli, I don't know what your thoughts are on that question around literacy being addressed.
Yes, Milton. I think I agree with you that if we have low literacy level at many parts in our country, then we can opt many other options like videos and visual audio instructions that even it can help a person with vision disability too. If anyone can't see the instruction or can't read the instructions, we can provide the audio instructions to a customer, and we can use icons so that the people who do not can't read, they can recognize the icons and they can use them accordingly. And there are a lot of initiatives from the government and Bangladesh Bank to provide trainings to rural women who are willing to use MFS, and there are many promotional activities from the banks and MFS who are, Bangladesh has a bank-led MFS system rather than telco-led MFS system. So mainly the banks take initiative to make their potential customers aware in every corner of the country. And Bangladesh Bank has advised the banks to train at least 3 rural women by each branch of the banks. So there are 64 districts in Bangladesh, and if each bank branches located in those districts, train about the uses of MFS and the wide arena of MFS in the rural women, then they can easily know how to use their MFS account and keep it safe. And they can frequently send voice messages to make them aware of the fraudulent activities they can face. So, then they might be cautious about those, and they will be less prone to fraudulent activities. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shoheli. I think it's so important to really, in your own context, know what sort of design elements that work, that have been very successful. I think this is part of something that can be learned from this research. But coming back to you, Hamilton, and trying to use this practically, I know that this was really designed to help program officers at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so that they know where to invest their time, invest their money. But for people who are practicing, and most of our alumni are practitioners, and they're in these countries who and they want to be able to leverage off the work that you've done and also segment their own customers or the female participants who uptake their products. What can they learn? How can they use the resources that we've shared here?
Thanks, Tariro. Yeah, so again, the one audience was the program officers at Gates, but then the other were just the implementing partner community writ large around financial inclusion and access to financial services. So our hope is that this is a public good. The link is out. Like we shared the link to the microsite with all of our resources that we've built. We're also going to be building some how-tos because it is a little bit of an intimidating size in terms of the resource and the number of slides and things of that nature. Our intent was really to make it very navigable, so clickable and moving around, so you're not having to go in chronological order of the slides necessarily, but you're clicking where you're interested. So we're building all that out, but like our hope is that it is a resource for people who are thinking about a new intervention or maybe even designing a concept note, for example, for their particular market. And it's a way to just sort of, sometimes I think a lot of us get ahead of ourselves in terms of designing interventions without really diving deep into the barriers or the challenges that we're trying to address. So the resource is meant to really help focus that as sort of an initial step. Where are the barriers? How can we approach identifying the barriers that are more relevant? Because we were supposed to prioritize barriers, but we couldn't really, because they're also important and also context specific, and it just depends on where you are in the world, and then also sort of the population that you're working with or you're trying to support. So it's really just sort of a resource that people can use to help kind of shape where their thinking is around specific barriers for a specific group that they're looking for, and then sort of sourcing ideas around from these exemplars and ideas of how people have approached it in other markets or in other contexts, and helping them think through, okay, well, they had these types of enabling environments, so it's that type of intervention, we might need to make a couple tweaks here and there. So that's really the idea. It's meant to help sort of ultimately design interventions that are based in sort of barriers and the evidence behind those barriers and understanding the evidence behind those barriers for women's economic empowerment.
Thank you very much, Hamilton. And thank you for being so generous with your knowledge and sharing all those resources. And I think that we really have received a lot of information and hopefully we're going to go back to the micro side and play around with it and find out new things that we possibly didn't hear from this session. But if you want to know more about customer segmentation, we do have another session tomorrow. So go to your swap card agenda and check us out. Also, the other example that Hamilton talked about, hey sister, show me the mobile money. Today we have a mobile gender gap session, and I know that Wisdom, who leads that campaign, will be there talking about that exemplar and how successful it is in Ghana. So you might want to join us again later today. But thank you very much to Shoheli, my panelist from Bank of Bangladesh. Thank you for giving that real life feel of how it is like, the gaps and the challenges, the barriers that women are facing, especially the rural women in Bangladesh. And thanks again to Hamilton for presenting to us your research. And I would like to say to the audience, thank you for joining us. And I hope you're enjoying day 2 of Pathway to 17 Summit. We'll see you again. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tariro, and thanks, Hamilton.
Thanks,
you.
Shoheli. Take care. Bye.